Welcome to Tabletop Tommies. I'm Jonny.
And I'm Phil. And today we're joined by Ali to talk about Megatron 3000, how the Scottish scene is looking for tournaments, and generally how he's finding tournaments so far in V3.
Yep, I have to say thank you very much, guys, for having me back on. I think it was maybe about this time last year.
Yeah, I think it was, yeah.
Yep, you guys gave me some airtime to talk about the Megatron 3000, but with the onset of version 3, some things have changed, some things haven't with Megatron 3000, and I guess it's been led by, a lot of the events that have happened within the UK and globally, trying to draw out what's good and repel what is bad about Bolt Action version 3, which even that sentence will light up, people's conversation bar. We can't even decide on that. We need an FAQ on that.
Not another one. Chris, no. I've got to say, I'm more interested in the stuff that hasn't changed, because in V2, it was unique even amongst the V2 tournaments.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious. I know you've carried a lot of the elements through, but obviously under a brand new version, I'm genuinely curious what you've done. I mean, do you want to talk through what V2 looked like, and so you can talk about what you've kept and how you've kept it? Because, I mean, for anyone who doesn't know, the theatre selector thing was the real USP, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was. So in Bolt Action version 2, when the Megatron 3000 was conceived, theatre selectors weren't very widely used other than, particular themed events or at club or local level. And it was all based on a conversation I had with one Scottish player who I have never named. I never want to give him credit for it. I mean, he's a good guy. We're good pals. But I'm not giving him the credit because it'll send his ego off the scale. But he complained to me that, Ali, what's the point of us buying these books? All we do is take out a couple of cool units and then basically throw the rest away. We never use these theatre selectors, etc., etc. So I decided to go all in, and the Megatron 3000 was born in that we only used theatre selectors. Once a theatre selector was chosen, it could never be chosen again. So every army was going to be unique in the sense that its formation was unique. And that helped me, drive ticket sales. It gave people an impetus to buy a ticket early to get the theatre selector that they wanted. Mm-hmm. And I put the pack out so far in advance that people could select a theatre selector and build specifically for it. I think I always put ticket sales like 10 months out. So there was this enormous lead-in time. And then I never advertised it, and I still don't advertise it as a competitive event or a thematic event or a historical event, because it kind of is all three at the same time. You're bringing themed historical lists, but the players have a competitive mindset when they're driving these lists. And it's only a one-day event. It's 3 games, and it's 1,250 points, which, depending on how where you ended up, that was still quite a large points level in version 2. And I think it was within the Scottish tournament circuit, it was one of the larger points levels. So it also gave value to all the theatre books that Warlord Games and Osprey printed, of which they're still on my shelf. I think there's 25 of them, and some of them are fantastic. Yeah, some of them are really great. Fortress Budapest, by
my favorite,
mine as well. It really is. Brian Cook, one of the main contributors there. I'm lucky enough to know the man from my time spent in Australia. I was also a huge fan of, and I've said this in many different places, the Operation Sea Lion and Operation Gigant, the sort of invasion of England that didn't happen. I love those books. I just love them.
Man of taste, yeah.
Yep, just absolutely phenomenal. What if scenarios and what if armies that should be getting produced more. So it gave value to those books, not just from the special units. And so that clicks onto V3, so version 3. And, it's the big unknown. We had that early glimpse of the platoon formation, the different platoons that you could make your army out of, and it was excitement and dread in equal measure. But what I needed to do was watch other tournaments run and also experience going to a V3 tournament, which I think a lot of I think for all of us, it was World Open War in Southend. It was my first V3 tournament.
Yeah, it was our first 2-dayer. I think we'd both been to maybe a 1-dayer before, but in terms of the proper kind of launch for a 2-dayer, it would have been World Open War. Yeah.
And then there were other events. I went to a few other 1-day events, and also not gathering data, but getting the feel of the room from the rest of the community in the US, Europe, UK, Australia. But the one key indicator that I had to wait on was the release of the first army book, Armies of Germany. I wanted to see what the format of the book was, and what I was specifically looking for was, were they going to do theatre selectors, or I truly thought they were going to bring out special platoons that you could sit alongside the rifle platoon, tank platoon, heavy platoon. I thought there might be, like a 1939 Wehrmacht platoon. This is, how.
Yep. That's really what I was hoping for, like a Battle of France platoon where you get more tanks, but obviously you're limited to what tanks you can take. That's exactly what I was really hoping for as well. Like we basically get the platoon selector is your national characteristic, basically, rather than you just get to be fanatic or stubborn. That was one of my big hopes,
I really hoped for it as well, but that didn't happen. The other thing I was looking for was what units were going to be in this book. Now, my daydream was that they were going to fold in all the units from all the theatre books and make the Armies of books really fat. And they kind of got like 85% there for it.
Yeah.
There's still, I hate sounding dirty, but there's a few things that I thought could have been in Armies of Germany that weren't. And they're all fringe cases that just stuff I liked. But there were stuff that was in the FAQ and the ATA, like the Flak Panther Colian. Like they make the model for it. They made rules for it in the V2 errata FAQ document, and then it just didn't.
Yeah, the one that surprised me was the Gavir sniper, because we made snipers a bit pants, and so having a double shot sniper. Because even at the end of V2 when we were playing with this, it wasn't an auto include necessarily. It was good, but like you still had to have a place for it. And it just seemed such an obvious thing to slip in because it didn't require much like rules adjustment or anything. Because it basically just says, take a second shot. That was the only rule. And so that was really weird that didn't make the cut.
Yeah, it was odd. So it's little oddities like that. But once I had that knowledge from the Armies of Germany book, I could make a decision about the Megatron 3000 in version 3. And there had also been enough noise by this point about the platoon structures and seeing how far it could be pushed. And I realized that the theatre selectors from version 2 were still applicable. And they truly are, in my belief. And the event will have to prove itself. But with only minor tweaks, so the only two changes within any theatre selector is any mention of a lieutenant gets erased and it's replaced by a platoon commander. Any mention of a captain or a major gets erased and it's replaced by a company commander. Everything else will stay the same. The points level is going to stay at 1,250 points. The unique theatre selector, the unique selling point of the tournament is the same, so it's the theatre selector. Once it's taken, nobody else can take it. The only provision the players have is that there has to be a version 3 unit entry that matches the units listed in the theatre selector. I am willing to be flexible in some respects. Okay. An example of that already is the Schützen squads from Western Desert.
Yeah,
they're not replicated in Armies of Germany. German infantry, that's it. You replace Schützen squads with them. There's a blanket provision that there are no free units of any type.
And the Schützen get the free guns.
Yeah, there are
So they're not getting their free guns either.
No, so the Schützen...
So that's interesting, because are you giving people the special rules that comes with the theatre selector? Do you know what I mean? Like the Hungarians have the Hussar tradition one where your tanks can lead the way, basically, I think. So are they still getting those special rules?
Those rules weren't tied to a theatre selector, though, from memory. Those were alternate national characteristics.
So they weren't specific to one singular theatre selector. It
Yeah.
was in case blue in this case. Yeah, you can use these national characteristics with the theatre selectors
Yeah.
from
Or
that
the other.
book.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
Um,
that I think in Budapest there are special rules that are attached to selectors. So if anyone
Okay.
hasn't selected it
now
yet,
that's what you're saying there. That's accurate. There are
yeah,
special rules tied to theatre selectors, and they're all applicable.
Okay.
A great example is from one of the D-Day books, Hedgerow Ambush.
Hedgerow Ambush. Yeah, I was going to
Yeah.
say. Yeah.
That's applicable to the points level. Yeah, you go for it. In the Stalingrad theatre book, Soviet forward artillery observers get to fire twice. Yep.
Yep.
That happens. But your national special rules are the printed version 3 national special rules.
Okay.
So for your army. So any British selector, their forward artillery observers will get to fire twice.
Yeah.
They can pick whatever it is, vengeance, all that other nonsense that they all like. The Germans, Hitler's buzzsaw is still there. The officer training's still there. Panzer Ace, that'll be a thing, but that's tied to your unit selection, it's not a trait that goes everywhere.
Yeah, sure. So so things, Ali, so as you mentioned Stalingrad, one of the Soviet selectors, you can upgrade all infantry units to fanatic, or certainly a lot of them. Yep. Is that going to come across? So you'd pay the points for the V3 equivalent, but because you've chosen that selector, you're allowing those units to be upgraded to fanatic.
Correct. Yes,
okay.
that is a thing. So that trait is tied to the selector, and there's a points value assigned to it. So that happens 100%. I'm sure, and this might change. No, I was going to give an example of the American motorized infantry, but that's a unit specific thing.
Yeah, and that one's quite an easy one to port over because the rule is fairly standardized. The Germans got the same one in their recce platoon where you get to re-roll to disembark, basically for a pointer model. Yeah.
Mechanized infantry seems to be almost a universal special rule now, doesn't it? Rather than linked to the German unit or the American unit.
Yeah, it's weird that didn't become a universal special rule, to be fair, because it's been printed so many times in V2 that we could have just thrown it in the main rulebook at this point. It's a bit like there was another one that came up a while ago, wasn't it? It's Fieldcraft a universal special rule now?
Yeah, it's yeah.
I can't remember. Oh, you know what it was? It was behind enemy lines, where everyone keeps getting behind enemy lines except under a different name.
Yeah. So, Ali, how are you managing, or certainly how are you thinking about managing, for example, multiple armored vehicles? Because in V3, you can take an armored platoon with up to 5 vehicles, but the V2 theatre selector may only have allowed 0-1 armored car and 0-1 tank in the old days.
Yeah. I don't know what you mean by handle it. This is one of the benefits of it.
Okay. Manage then.
Manage.
Mitigate? I don't know.
Manage and mitigate, I don't think are needed. Okay. Because here's the trick. In version 2, this event saw more tanks and armored vehicles than you would normally find at a normal event because of the nature of a lot of the theatre selectors.
Yeah.
You would almost find that there are theatre selectors that are armored platoons in the old tradition, in that they would have a command vehicle plus 2 core vehicles, and then you would have infantry, etc. Or you would have lieutenant in the old days, but platoon commander now, 2 infantry, and then you would have 0 to 2 tanks or 0 to 2 armored cars. So what the theatre selectors did in version 2, they let the players have more armor than they normally would in a normal event. Whereas now, what I believe, yet to be proven, is that the theatre selectors are actually forcing players to have less armor than is now the norm in version 3. And I truly believe this is a big call, but I think that's what players want, is that there's this feeling, and it's true, that version 3 is no longer an infantry game, it's an armoured game, it's a tank game with infantry.
Yeah.
I believe that the theatre selectors will rebalance that by having slightly less armour on the table compared to what version 3 does.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily about just the armor either. It's that the version 3 selected, like I've joked on the pod a number of times about, basically just take whatever you want now. No one cares. Pay 21 points, get an officer. You can have another 4 of them. You can have another 6 of them. Have whatever you want. And the benefit of the theatre selectors is each one gives you a benefit, but at a cost. So, like the ones with lots of tanks only have 3 troop choices, for example, or the ones with lots of troops have less armor. So, like the US, I think it was Battle of the Bulge, used to be able to take loads of bazookas, but you had no armor basically, and the armor you did have turned up late. And so, that's what I think the strength of theatre selectors is, that each one has a unique strength, but you have to pay for it by having something that's your weakness.
And it's not open season in your choices of tank. So if you do get 0 to 2 tanks, the list is short.
Yes.
It's not, you're not able to mix and match. You're not able to pluck, a fleet of Panzer twos out of the sky.
Yeah.
So, look, is it perfect? No, it wasn't perfect in version 2. It's not going to be perfect in version 3. But it still keeps its unique selling point, and it's popular. It's still popular. I mean, sadly, the ticket sales went on later than I would normally like to have done, by quite a way actually. I don't think ticket sales went out until February, when normally they'd be on sale by October the year before.
Mm-hmm.
But the reasons for that were it was the waiting game to see how the chips fell with version 3. But from memory, we've got a player capacity of 46 players, and I'm sure I've got 29 tickets sold. And we're still, April, May, June, July. We're still like 4.5 months out.
Yeah.
And I think that's plenty of time for people, because most people who are going to this kind of thing, they're relying on their stockpile of models anyway. They're not. A few of them will probably use it as an opportunity to build a brand new army, but I think for a lot of people, they'll lean on a platoon they've played before and just sort of like develop that for V3. And I think the theatre selectors are a lot of fun. Like, I'm getting bored. I used to really enjoy building armies, like just theoretical armies. Like, oh, what if you did this? And now it's dull, like, because there is no like, oh, how do I build a force like this? Oh, well, you just use the usual selector. So I think that restriction actually adds a lot of creativity and fun. And so I think, really good format for it.
No, I hope that works. And I believe that it will. I truly believe it'll work, and that the theatre selector books have still got life in them, and those formations that they offer the player base. So the event itself takes place on August the 9th in Stirling in Scotland. The venue's called Common Ground Games. Ticket price is £21.50.
Very reasonable.
3 games. It also includes a hot lunch with a soft drink and a packet of crisps or chips, depending on where you go. The great thing is, with this event, I've had international players turn up. I've had players from Denmark and the United States come up to play, or come over to play, come up to play. They've managed to arrange holidays and annual leave to take it in, so it grabs people's imagination. As you said, Jonny, it gives a good excuse to build a nice themed army.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it puts those limits on yourself that you don't just turn up with the impossible thing. I also think it'll give players a nice relief that they can mix and match their infantry again.
Yeah.
So you can have one squad of engineers, you can have one flamethrower team, then you can have 2 squads with light machine guns. So no, it's good.
Without having to take 12 officers in your army.
Yeah, exactly. And it also means, and this is where players have got to try and think now. So we're using all the version 3 gameplay rules. We'll be using version 3 orientated missions, version 3 units, but technically version 2 army restrictions. So there's not going to be platoon commanders, falling out of the sky. There's only going to be one.
Okay.
And a company commander. So you're going to have to take care of them.
That will be really interesting. Rather than just saying you have a rifle platoon with these units that are relevant to that theatre selector, then you take a recce platoon, blah blah blah. Actually limiting it to the one platoon commander, the however many squads you can take in that theatre selector. That will be really interesting.
Yeah. So from memory, 5 infantry squads is usually the limit.
Mm-hmm.
1 platoon commander. So the leadership bubble is going to have to be quite concentrated. Mm-hmm. I think people will be mad if they do not take a company commander in this format. So I would expect couldn't leave home without one.
Yeah.
At 1250, especially when there's no other, there's not like 3 other platoon commanders running about.
Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting because I'm still not sold on the company commander. Still not sold on him there. So it's fascinating that you're seeing him as an absolute auto include for your list.
Not for every list, believe me, and I have not taken him in every list. But when there is now limited numbers of other leadership bubbles around, so that there is only ever going to be one platoon commander, and thinking again, version 3 pins are flying everywhere.
Yeah.
I think he's an essential one in this format. The great thing is, if everybody takes them, the first couple of snap to actions will be absolute pandemonium.
It'll speed the game up, to be fair.
But then, what is there now to fear? In a snap to action, there's not going to be like 5 multi launchers launching. Well, there might be one guy that can do it, but everybody's got to think about the version 3 rules, minimum ranges of weapons. The adjusted points cost for some of the tanks. It's really good. I'm excited about it, and as are 29 other people so far, with space for more.
Have you had many questions so far, Ali, from those that have signed up as they start to try and build their army and their list and so on?
Yeah, I've had players run their prospective list past me just to say, can you check that this is legal before I go out and buy?
Yeah.
And there have been elements I've had to pick up. People have just little things like, if you've got an armor platoon, you need to have transport for everybody. So it's just doing the maths. It's like your spotters for your mortars count.
Yes.
You still need to do that. Just those little things. And I said earlier, the guy that's asked about the Schutzen squads, like there's no entry for Schutzen in version 3. So replace Schutzen with a Heer squad. And that's how you get it. So but obviously there's I haven't been able to please everybody.
No.
There are units that just don't exist.
Yeah.
And I am not gonna try to make them up. That's not. I want as much version 3 content in events that I can possibly have, with the exception obviously of the theater selectors. This might ruffle some feathers, but I'm not. You can't live in denial that version 3's here. You can't keep wishing for the things you liked about version 2. I've made a big concession keeping the theater selectors in to keep the DNA and that feeling of what the Megatron 3000 is. But everything else has got to be as version 3 as it can be.
Presumably you're allowing armies of US and maybe armies of Great Britain?
Oh, absolutely. If the book, as soon as the book's published, I think my cut-off date is only like 2 weeks before the event. I've really let players
go right to them.
Oh yeah, because as soon as those army books come out, they've got more unit entries to pick from, and that I believe is another reason why the ticket sales have dipped a little bit, because people are waiting. Armies as we record, the armies of the United States should be out sometime in this calendar month.
Yep.
And then April, May, June, July, maybe tail end of July, armies of the Commonwealth come out. So that'll give the players some leeway to pick.
Be interesting to see how many people take theatre selectors for the Soviet Union and Japan, given that because of when Megatron is, those books won't be out at that point, so they're having to pick their units from the main rulebook.
Yeah, I should really just be able to have a quick look and a quick scan, because one of the big admin things of this is keeping the player list up to date so that people can quickly look on and see what theatre selectors have been taken.
Yeah. I was looking to go at one point, but for personal reasons, it's not going to work. And I had one German selector in mind, which very recently got taken, which was the Interhell selector from Stalingrad. And I was also thinking about one of the US selectors, but it was very much dependent on what comes out in the armies of US.
Yeah, see how it goes. If I don't achieve the full 46, c'est la vie, but I can use that as a good spin-off to say that the Scottish tournament circuit has had its strongest start to a year ever in terms of numbers.
Okay.
traditionally we kick off in February with a doubles event called Spring Offensive.
Mhm.
And I'm sure this year we had 32 or 34 players. So, obviously that's divided by 2 to get the sort of doubles pairings, but that's the strongest start for Spring Offensive. Recently, there was an event called Northern Lights in Aberdeen, and geographically, it's a bit of a drive. Sorry, Aberdonians, even for Central Scotland, it's 2.5 hours. But a lot of us still make the pilgrimage north because the event's always good in terms of how it's run and how it's organised. And it was again this year. And I think this year there were 28 players, which is the highest number they've achieved for a singles event. So again, that's a good strong showing. Our next event is in Glasgow, and it's called the Guns of Broomlawn. And I'm sure he's had to try and get more tables and more space. He's upwards of 30 players.
Okay, and that's a one-day event, is it?
And that's a one day 3 games.
That's brilliant.
And in terms of formats are always different.
Mm-hmm.
The Aberdonian format was 1,250, and they had the provision that your minimum spend on your rifle platoon was for the 425 points, let's say.
Okay.
So your core rifle platoon had a minimum spend on it before you went off and did other things. The Guns of Broomlawn, he's maintained his format from version 2, which is 1,500 points, but he's got a 15 order dice cap on it. And he always just wants to see the big stuff, get the big toys out. There's a few other limitations, but nothing that's world ending like that. So no, it's a strong start for our community, and it's a good indication that version 3 is being accepted. It's here. Games are being played in clubs and in garages, and it's enjoyable. I have truly enjoyed every game I've played.
Nice. Jumping back to your selectors and something else we mentioned, Sea Lion. Is that in play for Megatron?
Yeah.
So if I want to take my nuns, my disguised paratroopers, because they don't have an entry is the problem, you see, I don't think. He's reaching.
I'm reaching. I can't. This is terrible.
Because I'm thinking, how am I going to take these nuns with the pistols?
Terrible podcasting, but I am reaching for the book.
Yeah, because they're all unique unit entries is the problem, is what I'm thinking. You see,
that's it though. If there's no unit entry for version 3, then you don't get to play it.
I'm amazed no one's put in though to ask you about Sea Lion yet, because that one is a lot of fun.
Yeah, but I would have to automatically tell them no. I cannot make any exceptions on the rule of cool.
Not even for nuns.
Not even for nuns on the run, I'm afraid to say. You could maybe discuss getting it, as a commando section.
Maybe.
And then just use proxy miniatures. I wouldn't be opposed to that. I'm never going to be opposed to that. But are the nuns? Boy Scout, Urban Militia, Shire, Veteran Urban Militia Patrol, Club Shooting Team. Look, they're in there somewhere. But
well, if the nuns are off the table, if we can't do the Sea Lion, that's me out, I guess. But Scottish Nationals is the month after, though, isn't it?
Yeah. So
what's happening with the Scots Nationals this year?
So the Scottish Nationals is, I want to say it's in its 9th or 10th year of running. It's a long-standing event. And it is going to be held in the same venue in Stirling at Common Ground Games on the 20th and 21st of September, 2025. And I believe it is going to be Scotland's only 2-day bolt action event. And it's going to be, so the format is going to be 1,100 points. It will be 1 to 2 rifle platoons and then 0 to 1 of every other platoon type after that.
Interesting.
So 1 or 2 rifle platoons, then 0 to 1 tank, heavy support, Reese, engineers, etc., whatever you call these platoons. I can never recall the specific names. 1,100 points. Have at it.
What was the thinking, Ali, to limit the number of sort of supplementary platoons to just 1?
It's a byproduct of what we see in the community.
Yeah.
I don't want to limit I don't want there to be limits of, only one observer or, maximum 2 multi-launchers of any type.
Yeah.
I don't want to go down that path. The hard composition starts with the army structure. Yeah. So 1 to 2 rifle platoons and then 0 to 1 of every other support. It means we don't get to see, all these, campfire horror story builds that people love to talk about. You see them spoke about, but you never actually see a photograph of, 15 FT-17s on the table. I've never seen that.
And I'd love to see it though.
Yeah, but you would love to see it. Lots of people
You're crushing my
talk about
dreams
it.
over here, Ali.
Yeah, lots of people
you won't
talk
let me
about
run the
it.
nuns, and now you won't let me see 15 FTs.
You hear about it, but you never see it. There are all these horror stories out there. So that's where that came from.
Yeah.
And listen, I'll be straight up. I was maybe 40% sold on using the version 2 single generic reinforced platoon.
Yeah, I'm game for that.
I have said this in other sort of media channels, but I was really close to pulling the trigger. But it's that voice that I've mentioned earlier. Version 3 is here, and we have to be part of it. So, the month before I've conceded and using the theatre selectors, but that was what the Megatron 1000 was and is and should be in the future.
Yeah.
Whereas the Scottish Nationals is, it's part of the Scottish community, and it should move with the times. It can't. I don't want it just to be my personality within it. It's got to be part of the game, which means it's part of the community, and it should be accessible to all players. So players that are new to version 3 that don't have any memories of version 2, it's just a story for them. They should be able to access the Scottish Nationals. So
yeah, I think also the element is we want variety in tournaments, and what the tournament is, I think, sort of leans into what you make your restrictions. So the Scottish Nationals is sort of like the major tournament in Scotland. It's only 2 days. You said you want it to be a generic tournament. You want it to be sort of standard V3 so that everyone can come and have a standard game. And then the sort of the generic reinforced platoon, which I do think still has a place, that's a great one for like a 1 day quirky tournament, so you can play something different. A bit like how Megatron's a quirky 1 day because you get to play theatre selectors. And I think each of them has their own like merits and demerits, and depending on what players are looking for, I think you have to sort of lean at the restrictions accordingly.
Yeah. I have got a player pack in my pocket that I've written just if there was ever a gap or opportunity to quickly run it out. And it's having the Recce platoon as the core choice. And then having, I think it's like Recce, God, I wrote it ages ago. Recce platoon's a core choice.
Yeah.
But it's 1. You have to have 1, and then it's 0 to 1 of all the other platoons except the artillery platoon. So everything's about movement.
Yes. Yeah.
Everything's about movement. So it's almost trying to recreate the old tank wars, the old tank wars tank platoon. So all your infantry would have to be zipped up, at least for your Recce platoon. So just as a quick, point of difference, just something fun. But again, that just encourages even more tanks and armor, which people kind of freak out about now.
No, I don't mind them.
Yeah, I don't mind either. Depends on who you listen to in the world.
Yeah, I think it depends whether you came prepared or not as well. Because I think if you come expecting 2 tanks and then you face 4, then it's a bit of a shock. But if you came knowing that you might face 6 tanks and you face 4, you're like, oh, easy.
Yeah, it's been my experience so far in version 3 that nobody's prepared for. Nobody has enough.
Nobody's expecting it.
Nobody's expecting enough, and maybe I just used too many tanks. But
I imagine you got some good price support for Megatron, do you?
Traditionally, we have always done really well with the Megatron 3000, and early on, it's always been my goal to try and put a prize in everybody's hands. And I know I probably would have said this last time on the podcast, that the Megatron 3000 is just one part of the Scottish menu of bolt action events, and each event treats their prize support and how it's all awarded differently. Some do raffles because they're trying to support their club or local gaming hall or gaming group. Then there's other ones that are limited, just first, second, third. Megatron 3000's goal is prize for everybody. And to do that, we need sponsors. And this year, so far, I would like to thank MicroArt. Oh, sorry, I'm going to say these are in no particular order, but I think they're just how I've written them down on this random bit of paper. But MicroArt Studio, Mardav Miniatures, Game Mat EU, Alba Studios, War Games Atlantic, 3D Printing Valley, Coed Designs, First Core, Any-Scale Miniatures, Osprey, and Warlord Games. That is so far. I do have a lot of other emails out there to chase up, and those sponsors are providing different levels of prize support for different activities. I'm not sort of ready to announce properly yet. I will also be getting my trophies from a Scottish company called Demonscape, and Demonscape also do a lot of your pin markers. They've also got a good range of damaged vehicle markers now that we need, steering column damage, turret jam, slow, immobilized. What else is there? I've got a whole stack of them.
I don't know. I just always hope you destroy it and I don't have to worry about it. I'll just show you if it's ever at risk, I'll just turn so you get the rear shot, and then I don't have to worry about all this nonsense. Just turret jam, etc. Yeah, I've never played turret jam, and I'm hoping to never play turret jam, to be honest.
So if we turret jam you, Johnny, you just I destroyed.
Yeah, I'll be like, oh well, that was embarrassing. What I'll do is I don't know what I'll do.
Or next
turn I'll do a 180 so that you can shoot us in the rear plate and finish it off, and then I don't have to worry about it anymore.
To shoot it properly, but
yeah.
So now those are the sponsors so far for the Megatron 3000, and I suppose for that as well, as a point of difference, the following month at the Scottish Nationals, and this is something I started last year, was that there are prizes sponsored by Warlord Games for first, second, and third. Mm-hmm. And then all the other prizes, there are only going to be 5 other prizes, and they're going to be supply crates. And within those boxes, there's only going to be produce from Scottish wargaming companies and wargaming suppliers. And every round, one of those boxes will go to the player that puts a winning ticket in first, a winning result slip in first. Now, I think in the past, or at least I did last year, I limited those prizes to only go to the foreign visitors that we had. Mm-hmm. And I have no idea if those foreign visitors I'm going to have that many. I don't know how the player pack's going to be received, if players are willing to travel, etc., etc. But the idea is that these supply crates are a showcase for the Scottish wargaming industry. And last year, we had at least 5 companies supply vouchers and samples of what they can do. And I'm hoping to do so again, and I'm just hoping to grow that again. And we also threw in some Scottish food produce. There was a Canavan brew, Tunnock's tea cake, really good Scottish produce. So I'm hoping to do that again. And again, that's just a unique selling point for those visitors that are coming to Scotland for the Scottish Nationals. So again, and it's a different thing. And for the Scottish players, the month before, you just had Prize Bonanza at the Megatron 3000.
Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm.
So, your next event is focused on your gameplay and how you can actually, play the game and put results in. So, yeah, little points of difference.
Nice. If you've listened to us this far, then obviously you're enjoying the sound of Ali's voice. And so perhaps you should check out his podcast. What sort of stuff do you feature over there, Ali?
So the podcast I co-host is called Two Guys, One Dice Cup. And I co-host that with my friend Phil from Harash's Cairns. And when I host that, I am Al GoldenEye Unicomb. Our acronyms and names there come from the Blood Bowl tournament scene. Myself and Phil are very active playing Blood Bowl and have been for a long, long time. And the podcast originally started with, pretty much all Blood Bowl chat, but a lot of people have reminded me, it's like, yeah, Al, but every podcast you talk about bolt action and what you're doing. And so we've diversified. So we've started to do different product reviews for bolt action. Whenever it comes time to talk about events, we don't just talk about Blood Bowl events, we talk about bolt action events as well. And during the I think during the 6 years we've been recording and putting podcasts out, I have slowly worn down Phil to play bolt action, even to the point where Phil operates his own 3D printing company called Granite Miniatures, and you'll be able to find him on Etsy. But he's picked up some, what do you call it, manufacturers' licensing agreements.
Okay,
to produce
for bolt action.
For bolt action, yeah. And he's enjoyed some good sales through that. So yeah, if you don't want to hear some more of my voice, and also, for yourself, the Tabletop Tommies, you guys are all bolt action. So if you're listening to this podcast, I'm sure you listen to other channels, and I do crop up on other bolt action podcasts and YouTube channels from time to time. So
fairly frequently, some might say.
Well, and the funny thing was, my wife looked at me when I told her I was recording with yourselves, and she's like, "What? So they're making money off you now, like everybody else?"
I wish.
But it was that joke. It's like, yeah, but I don't produce enough original content to fill a whole podcast channel every day. But happily, I do enjoy. What I enjoy most about it is that other type of community when I get to interact with. I don't think it'd be offhand to mention their podcast, but the Snafu podcast from the United States, they've got their own thoughts and opinions and ideas about what the game is and how the game should be. The Cast Dice Network with Brad Moran coming out of Melbourne, Australia. Again, another continent, another community that has different ideas and views, and I get to share mine and also hear theirs. And then you've got that European vibe from Bo Mortensen on his YouTube channel. Again, thoughts and feelings on bolt action from Denmark and sort of Central Europe. So I enjoy being able to dip into all these communities and share my ideas and the stories I've got. I really enjoy the game and enjoy sort of sharing how it can be done differently. Because those guys are wrong a lot of the time, but they're also right a lot of the time as well. So
I'm really interested, Ali, to hear with Bo, to hear how the last event went for you. I've been watching your journey through. I'm going to take tanks, and I'm going to take air observers, and I'm going to take the next thing to get rid of air observers, and so on.
Yeah. So it's been a naturally evolving journey through Bolt Action version 3 that I've really enjoyed. But I've also developing this stigma towards the limits that people put on things that I'm seeing crop up. Because when you're limiting one, you're just empowering another.
Yeah. And,
the best example is the 5 Panzer III list, which I've seen crop up in Sweden and other places. Great. Use it. It is an amazing tool, and I highly recommend it. But to beat it, okay, I suggested air observers. There are other ways to beat it. But if you limit the air observers, you're just empowering tanks.
Yeah.
In a future recording with Bo, I'll be talking about the veteran tanks.
Yeah.
If you wanted to shut that army down, 3 US air observers will sort out in about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have any counter. I didn't have any flak at all.
Yeah.
But then if you let the air observers in, something else comes along to beat them. Yes. And it's that constant flow of rock, paper, scissors, or the other options to beat it. But once you start putting limits on things, you just empower others.
Yeah.
And it frustrates. It's frustrating.
Yeah, Jonny, you often said this in V2, that as soon as you start as an event, you restrict things to 0 to 2 multi-launchers, flamethrowers, whatever. You're just shifting, not the problem, but you're shifting it into another direction. And like you just said, Ali, something else moves forward and goes into pole position, and then you've got to counter that.
Exactly. And we saw that right at the death of version 2. There was a fantastic experiment. It was done by a gentleman called Russell Wright in England. And it was the Gurkha Stuart list. And I think over the course of 2 or 3 events, he gathered all the British Gurkha themed lists together, and he averaged the number of, lieutenants, Gurkha units, Stuarts, brain carriers, engineers, and he just averaged them. And then he took that average list, or somebody took the average list and did really well, because it was this is the list we have.
Yeah,
Distilled it, matured it, boiled it down. All the event packs, let this list run. This is what you take.
Yeah,
and that's maybe the path that people are going down, and it's a rabbit hole. But I'm on my own journey, and I conform to whatever the event format is. But what's important, and I hope that other players think about this as well, is that watch where you get your information from.
Yes.
It's quite fortunate that I'm talking to Phil and Jonny, but Phil, he provided a little sort of snippet of information from last year when you took some veteran tanks purely by accident, because you were.
It was English Open at Warfare. I was the Gumby, so I wasn't planning to play, and we had a dropout on the Thursday afternoon. So I had to step in and play, and I wanted to obviously play as quick as possible with as lower dice count as, or lowest dice count as possible. I just painted up the new winter US. I had a bunch of Shermans lying around that had already been painted, and I ran some veteran Shermans and did surprisingly well.
Yep.
Dropped that into the pod. We then communicated offline about it, and then you took the idea and ran with it, which is fantastic. Yeah.
Because it was grabbing that snippet, and then it's also looking at what I've seen locally and beyond with autocannons and light mortars and anti-tank rifles and lots of dice, and just watching how they've played. Then it's grabbing the information about pins, how quickly pins get dealt out. And then some of that was down to my own gameplay, where I had lots of autocannons, and I had it was during our doubles event. I had a player who'd never had done any V3 games, but we buddied up in version 2 lots of times. And I tried to show him, it's like, right, we are about to pin out that unit of veteran infantry. It was an absolute beast. It was like 10 British paras with 20 LMGs, submachine. It was in behind hardcover. It was a fortress of bad guys. But I said to him, I was like, look, mate, here's the tactic. We're going to stick 2 pins on it now.
Yeah.
They've got their company commander nearby. They'll pass a test and do something. They'll be down to 1 pin. Then as soon as they've done that, we are going to dump 9
everything
pins
left
on them.
Yeah.
And they're going to disappear. Ali, do you think that'll work? I'm like, it's going to work. Because I had 4 heavy autocannons, there was 2 infantry squads, I had a sniper, there was enough on hand at the worst roll in that we could put
to put the pins on it. Yeah, once they'd activated and they couldn't rally it off later on in the turn. Yeah.
Exactly. And then we dumped it on. And when that unit got to 6 pins, that's when our opponents realised it's like,
what was going on?
We're stuffed. Because at some point when they were on 4 pins, it's like, oh no, you're never going to kill them all, because they were making all their hard cover saves. Like, I don't care about killing you because you are going. And they went. So it was watching that ability to dump out all those pins and remembering back to the problem I had with the 5 Panzers getting pinned out by air observers or getting really stuck in the ground. I'm like, I know how to solve that. And then pulling it together. Then I tested out the veteran Panther when I was testing out armies of Germany, and nobody has I promise you, nobody's got an answer to a veteran Panther. It's absolute destruction on tracks. But then that distilled down again to, okay, what else do I need? And then this is a conversation for another channel and another time, but it's what else do you need on top of some veteran tanks to win games? Tanks.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Because veteran tanks are great.
Yeah.
But what else do you need to win games with that? So, I am really enjoying version 3, and I hope that comes over whenever I speak on a
definitely. And I think it's really important, Ali, what you just said. Like, be careful is too strong a word, but be mindful of where you get your information from, who you listen to, because there are people out there saying this is the way, this is the only way, etc. And it just may not be the case. You dump it into a 1-day event, dump it into a 2-day event, and what you think is, the build, actually, because we're so early on into V3, there are going to be ways to unpick it. There's going to be other things to counter it. We've heard the phrase rock, paper, scissors, but we've also heard the phrase of rock, paper, scissors plus another 3 things on top of it, because it isn't just like 1, 2, or 3 builds. It's 6 or 7 things potentially.
And it's the quirky things catching people out as well. I think we commented on this after Beachhead, where you had good V2 players, like very good V2 players, taking sort of a very standardized V2 list and being caught off guard by something that was just bizarre. Someone had basically thrown everything in the kitchen sink into a list
Yeah.
and they weren't ready to counter it yet. But obviously, that only works for a limited time span before you sort of work out the strat to counter it. And so, as I say, that rock, paper, scissors it's in flux all the time.
As it should be.
Well, thank you for listening. And huge thank you to Ali for joining us. Hopefully, we've got many excited people already signed up to Megatron off the back of that. And I imagine Scottish Nationals is going to be a big one this year, I think, as the first V3 Scottish Nationals. But again, thank you for coming on, Ali.
Pleasure as always. Thank you so much for letting me come on. If you are ever in need of a third chair later on in the year, I'm sure I will have even more things to talk about because, I've talked about the path I'm on in version 3. I already know the next step after veteran tanks, and I cannot wait to roll it out. At some point, I'm going to fail, and it's going to be awesome too.
Yeah, we absolutely would have you back later on. I'm enjoying listening to your journey with Bo, and I'll be really, really keen to, get you back on to talk about tournaments in the second sort of 6 months. We're in that first 6 month period at the moment. Let's see how things settle as we get towards September, later on this year and towards the 1 year anniversary. Yeah. Good stuff. Well, thanks again, Ali. That's everything from me.
Ta-ta for now.
Ta-ta for now.
Ta-ta for now.
Hey, he said it.